Hey everyone, and welcome to the Psyched Practice Podcast, your one stop for practical and useful clinical information, masterful insight from experts in the field, and a guide to daily living. I'm your host, Paul Wagner. Joining me as always is
Ray Christner.
And, wanted to take some time today to really talk about, prioritization, time management, and just kind of overall productivity. It's such a busy time of the year, and the big one is holidays, but it's just so much more than that too. It's, families are busy. There's school schedules or work schedules. It's coordinating time with family. It's making time for self-care, especially if you've been following some of the recent episodes we've been doing with,
right.
Or self-compassion. But a part of it is, how do we also get it all done and fit it all in? And we were hoping today to kind of take some time to just kind of go over at least some of our practical tips that we use in our daily life, as well as that we talk about in sessions.
Yeah, I would say like right now, that's what I'm hearing probably the most from people I see for counseling. I was kind of surprised how much in the last month that's the recurring struggling to get things done, feeling stressed, feeling like they're falling behind. And you're right, man, the holidays I think are coming, but kids are back in school. There's sporting events. There's, all these things that are going on now, even with the holidays, you now have, kids concerts and those types of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then all these other things I think still, are there. And then there's the other piece, I think I hear more and more how stressed people are about what the demands of their jobs are. I now have so much I have to do. And, I probably this week alone, probably 10 or 15 times somebody said, my company's short staffed. I'm picking up double duty right now to get things done. So, so how do we do it in a way that we get things done, but also that I think, takes a little of that burden off of us. So, So how do we want to start with this? You want to talk about what you do?
And really, I have to call out my wife, because she does this part of it so much.
She's your
better.
Time management.
Really? Yeah, no, I mean, she is so effective with it, and really has helped me develop the skills that maybe I was struggling with, and kind of offsets a lot of the poor executive function I can have. But I think one of the biggest pieces is planning and scheduling in advance. And sometimes that's easier said than done. But, if we can making sure that we're using some form of calendar or date book or something like that, because, when the day comes, I don't want to just rely on memory alone. And, I don't remember if it was in the conversation we had with Ari Tuckman or if it was in one of the training videos I watched with him. But I remember him saying, we want to externalize, we don't want to rely only on, the fact that I think I'm going to remember. No, if I'm writing on a calendar, the calendar doesn't forget. I might forget to look at the calendar, but the calendar is not going to forget what it is that I'm writing down. So making sure we're putting it out there and we have a point of reference, I think, is a crucial starting point for us to be effective in knowing what it is that's needing to get done.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that it's I think we all believe that our memory works good sometimes. And it really, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people make is that we try to hold so much in our working memory. And there's a book, I can't think who the author is, but it's called Getting Things Done. And in there, he talks about the working memory system compared to a computer, and basically just says, if you open up all these screens on your computer and you have all these things running, your computer is going to be sluggish. It's not going to perform well. But we sometimes expect our brains to do the same thing. And he's like, just simply having a calendar. Now, the book, I think, talks more about a paper calendar, just write it down on a paper calendar, which I think is great for some people. For me, I have it on my phone that connects to my computer, that connects to my iPad. So no matter what device I'm on, I have, a way to access it. But, I look at it as when I need to do something, I put it on the calendar immediately, no delay in that.
And that's a skill I've really going back, and you just can't, give my wife enough props for that. That's something that she had already been doing really well. And it became a model for me that I could kind of follow when, kind of early dating, when dating started to become we're co-scheduling or co-coordinating with things. Right. I'm looking at it, I was like, wow, yeah, no, she has this down. Let me follow suit. And now, I have a a beautifully color coded calendar that tells me what's going on. And I try to add in things, and she's certainly adding in things. And, when there are conflicts, it gives us that opportunity again ahead of time. Let's coordinate how it's going to happen so we can kind of make it easier and smoother on us in the execution of these different things by having these conversations about the future. So I think just that's such an important piece. And, you're talking about using the digital and our digital calendars. And certainly that's one that I use. And there is one in particular that I really like. It's an app, and I believe it's available for both iOS and Android. It's called Fantastical. And
I don't know that one.
Something I really like about it is that it has both you can integrate all your calendars in. The color coordination, it's not quite as nice as the Google Calendar I like to use, but what I really do like is that it integrates the Apple reminders into so I can have reminders that are popping up for me at various times that are going on. And it's kind of like a one-stop shop, which is really nice. And I don't have to remember to go look at my reminders, which is, it's remembering to be productive. And
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think technology is it's really helped with that, I think, a lot. And I like reminders too. I tend to stick with my calendar that's in Outlook because I compare it to my calendar for work that, connects with my, the EHR. So that works pretty well for me. But yeah, I mean, I think there's two things though. I think with calendars, it's when you get told something, do it immediately, so I was at the dentist the other day, and when I set the appointment, she's like, "You want me to write you an appointment card?" Well, no, because I'm going to lose the appointment card. So, but I said, can I just take a minute here and just enter it? And I put it into my calendar before I walked out of the dentist. But then I think the point you made earlier, I think really important as well, is it's that planning ahead. It's okay. What events do we have next week? Right now, we talked about the holidays coming up. I'm sitting there going, okay, I know I have family coming in the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I need to prepare for that. So I can't have evening appointments going late. So, got to block that off on the schedule. And every time, like every week, I kind of sit back and go, okay, what are some upcoming things I need to look at that I want to do? And listen, sometimes we miss them. I mean, there's times that I go, oh gosh, I forgot that was going to happen. That's okay. We adjust it. But the more we can kind of put those events on early, I think the better. I mean, I try to do that as much as I can.
Yeah. And adding in those little extra notes as well. And so, I'll put in I have a meeting, but what's the platform that the meeting is going to be on? Or, what I really love, again, technology, it can be such a great tool, is being able to add in the address of where I'm supposed to be at. And so that way it's going to kick in and tell me when I need to leave 15 minutes before I need to leave. So that way I can start actually paying attention. And when I ignore that a reminder, then it tells me when I need to leave in that, within a minute or two. And it's okay, that's my real one. Right. And so, if we can take the time to plan well, it makes the actual execution just so much smoother.
Yeah. Takes seconds to save minutes, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Because it really does only takes a second to put some of those addresses and things in. And it does, it saves us a lot of time. So that's a great point. Maybe since we're talking about calendars, what do you think about things like block scheduling? Do you use that? Is that something you incorporate in?
I would say I probably don't use it as much as I should, but when I find myself, especially if there's a task I can predict, it's okay, I'm going to, from this time to this time, I'm holding space for this recurrently. And so, in terms of, if I'm working on progress notes, or if I'm working on, things for the podcast, it's I have those blocked off that I know that they are just kind of held in the calendar for space. But I think also another piece of that is I don't do the best job at predicting how long things are going to take. And so I have to kind of overestimate because it's just inconsistent. And sometimes a task that should take me an hour, takes me 3 hours. And then sometimes I get it done in 30 minutes. And I'm like,
right.
Oh, where is that more often than that? And so I think another part, with block scheduling, I think it's a great resource and tool, but you also have to know yourself, because if I rely too strictly on block scheduling, I think I'm going to be inconsistent with it, or I'm not going to, effectively use it. And then at that point, it's maybe more of a hindrance than it is a benefit to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many different ways to do it. I mean, so for me, I use that pretty regularly. It's kind of one of my key ways of keeping productive. But I think of it in kind of zones. So I have like my green zones they're free for all. Anything can go in there at any time. It's whatever. Then I schedule like these yellow zones, and my yellow zones are, I'd really like to work on some other projects on this time, but maybe I need to put a patient appointment in there for counseling. Great. I can squeeze that in, or something comes up. I can put it in that zone. But then I have kind of my hard red zones, and those are the ones that, I don't budge on. Like they're really like, so, typically if we're scheduling that we're going to record, I make that a red zone. Like it's something we're going to try not to move. I think sometimes, things do get in the way, but most often we can keep them solid. I have some red zones that are my writing time or my research time. And, I don't budge. Like those are days I'm going to do it. Or I might have report writing time for evaluations I'm doing. Those are kind of hard and fast. And I find it useful for those kind of things. So it's not really the fact of, that I'm just putting like, I'm going to get this task done. It's a group of tasks. So it may be 3 or 4 reports that I'm going to try to get done in that time. But when that time is done, it's also the time that I stop. And it's like, so, if I block off 3 hours for, writing, if I'm working on a book or something like that, at that 3 hours, then, my timer goes off. I finish whatever sentence I'm on and I step away. That's been the hardest thing for me to learn. I wish I would have done that when I was young, but I think it really, you get wiser with it. I always thought, man, I might have this momentum. I'm going to do really good. But what ended up happening for me is it kind of burnt me out. So for me, these hard kind of red zone things, when I'm done, I walk away and, I'll put a little note, maybe if there was an idea that I wanted to continue. Yeah. But then I just step away. And I feel like then the next time I visit that time again to write, I pick right back up. Like my idea isn't that I was going to forget something. It really doesn't happen, but I never burn out on it. Like it's something that I look forward to. I don't wear myself down. And, so I that's how I use block scheduling, which is kind of modified, I think, from what other people do. But it's more about this task is going to happen during this time versus, I'm going to get X done. I don't really, it's not about how much I get done. It's just the time I'm going to put into it.
And there's a piece that you added in there towards the end. And I think it's so important. And especially like, you said, like, you don't tend to forget your idea. I struggle because I do forget what I was going to say or what I was going to do. And so making sure I'm leaving myself notes of what is it that I was thinking, or like, what's the next step? Like if I am walking away from something, because I try to be consistent with things, but there's times where it's like, oh, I'm planning on picking this back up tomorrow. And if there's a pause, it's like, I'll probably remember. Oh, let me just write a note just in case. Or because sometimes it's a week, 2 weeks later that I'm actually getting back to that. And it's like, okay, wow, now I had no idea where it was. And like, I can read over the last few lines, but I don't necessarily remember where was what was the message, or what was the theme or the significance I was trying to create out of this moment. So, making sure, as we're maybe even setting those timers, like have your cutoff time, and then maybe a few minutes before start your wind down process, and giving yourself that time to make sure, okay, this is where I'm at. And especially if it's for like home projects and things of that nature. So like I guess over the course of 2 weeks, I was replacing my sump pump in my house because it went up, and it was like, all right, I cut all the piping, and then it was like gluing it all together, and I had it all set, and then we had to leave. Right. And like, I just ran into I was like, okay, so, here it is, a half assembled sump pump in my basement. I was like, okay, I need to make sure I'm writing myself notes, because there's some very specific steps I was hoping to get to that I didn't. And, thank goodness. And I was able to pick it up a few days later on and get it all installed. But man, that was, I thought I would remember, but when I picked it, like I went back down there, I was just like, I don't need to check my notes. And I'm looking, I was like, all right, I have no idea what I was supposed to do. And thank goodness, I thought ahead to do my future self a favor. Yeah.
And maybe that's a good point, is maybe it depends also on what the task is that we're blocking out like that. So I think like a task like that, you're right. We probably have to take some more notes. When I look at my time, like that's creative time, if I'm writing, it's interesting, writing a lot in my career. When I did my dissertation, it was this I would just keep working until I could get like, I would burn myself out. And honestly, I hated it by the end. It was just this, when I now write professionally, when I block it, I never get tired of it. Like, I think that's the good part. The other piece is when I step away from it, I think I'm on this momentum, but I've learned over time when I step away from the creative process and I go back, I might not go exactly where I was going to go that day, but I sometimes think it's almost better. Like, I think it's actually like it. So that time away made me rethink a few things. So I usually go back and I'll reread maybe the page before, and then it just kind of picks up. So, I mean, I think, it probably a difference in creativity time versus step by step. I can't put this together wrong time. It's a little different process.
And, you're talking about block scheduling, and it is probably something I need to implement and incorporate a bit more. But, when I'm thinking about how I structure my day, I think I just made up this term when someone asked me about it years ago, but I came up with the term of anchor points. And it's like, okay, what are the things that I know for sure are going to happen at certain times? And how do I orient my day around those pieces? And so, Monday through Friday, work is going to, so, okay, so what am I needing to do a little bit before I leave for work? What am I doing, each kind of in between sessions at work? And what am I doing after work? And being able to think about like, okay, that's pretty consistent. But for things like the weekend, okay, and I think we were talking a little bit beforehand, I have a med check appointment, tomorrow morning at 8:30. All right. So that means I need to leave the house at this point in time. So now's not the time for me to say, I'll pack my stepdaughter's lunches the morning up. It's like, no, I'm on a bit more of a time constraint. Let me do these things ahead of time. So that way I know. So it just becomes that point where it's like, I know I need to, it's going to stay there regardless. So I need to make sure that I'm ready for it and it's not really moving throughout my day. And I find myself filling in the gaps in between those anchor points. And that tends to be how I structure my day with various tasks and trying to identify what's most important to get done throughout those days as well. Yeah,
I love that idea. And I think that fits in, kind of with what I do as well. So I have my blocks, but then I have those anchor things that are going to happen. And, I think the other thing I put in place, and I think we talked about it at some point, I always tell people, I never think in hours. I always think in minutes. There's 1,440 minutes in a day. So that's kind of how I think. And a lot of times people think that sounds weird, but, so for me, I'm a list person. So I have to write my list out. And then after every task I do, in parentheses, I put, okay, it's going to take 5 minutes to do this. Maybe I have to call and get my car scheduled, or probably go online and schedule my car to get serviced. That's 5 minutes. It's not going to take long. But when it's on my list, then if, those anchor points, maybe I go to the doctor's and it takes 10 minutes instead of a half hour, I have 20 minutes that I can get some things done. So I can go down my list and go, okay, this is only going to take 15. Let's knock this out. And it really is amazing. Like when you think like that, how it changes. And I wish it was something like I created, but I had a class when I was a freshman in college, and they were like, think in minutes. And if you think in minutes, you're going to be an effective college student. And that's kind of where I started it. I started, I was 18 years old and kept lists, and I had my minutes. But I also, as a college student, was really good at not studying at night. I wasn't doing, I blocked my day off that at 6 o'clock I was done, and I could walk away from it. But I really maximized time, where maybe other people had a half hour, maybe they went and, played ping pong. I didn't. I took that time because the evenings were more important to me to do things than those minutes in the day. So I'm a minute thinker as well with those anchor points. I'm jealous of that. And something I found, I remember, it was an earlier episode. I think you shared that. But I've been trying to get mine down. And I would say,
I felt very, very comfortable in the half hour to 15 minute, like, okay, that's how I thought about my day. And I've been trying to, wean that down into like the 10 to 5 minute range. And I think I'm pretty good at keeping things in 10-minute chunks at this certain points and expecting them, but I'm not as refined to get to 5. And I oftentimes find if I try to do that, I overshoot or undershoot, and it's less consistent there.
But I think that just shows how flexible those things can be depending on, your personality. I mean, I think that, all these things we're talking about, they've modified for a person, you got to kind of fit what works for you. And for me, I literally have things that go take 1 minute, and I'll put it, and it's like, why do I write 1 minute things down? Because those are the ones I actually forget the most, to be honest.
Yeah.
The things take a half hour. I know they have to be done. It's the little things that I go, oh yeah, I needed to make that phone call, or I needed to go online and make this payment today, whatever it might have been. Those are the things that, because they're so simple, they're easy to kind of we miss them. But I think if 10 minutes works, great. If 1 minute works, good. Maybe some people never get down to that level. If it's effective, that's the key. I think that's the way we have to look at it.
And, I guess talking about that level of effectiveness, I also want to talk about, how we keep track of time when we're doing certain tasks. So I think, when you're talking about thinking in minutes is a goal I'm still going to be striving for, but also making sure that we're assessing how much time, like trying to have that accurate assessment of how long will this task take. And I know that is a weak point for me where I try to give myself more room because I'm consistently inconsistent. So sometimes I'm spot on. Sometimes again, I'm shortchanging myself. Sometimes I'm overestimating, and it's being able to have that, no knowledge of yourself, but really, especially the things that are recurrent. I think it's so helpful and so useful. And something I try to talk about with clients is like, hey, like, how long does this actually take? And like, let's collect data for this. So, if it's, and does it need to take that long too? Or are we just filling space? So it's like, it takes me this long to get a shower. Like, okay, well, it's just going to fill the space, but does it need to take that long? Or are we like, are we kind of going through, routines that aren't effective or efficient there? And like, can we shorten, and what's the value of doing that? What's the time that it gives back throughout the day? So kind of cutting down and where we can, because we actually are assessing how long is this task taking me?
Yeah. I think, it's interesting because I think some people, there's this internal clock that they have that they can just do it. And I think for others, the battery's dead on that internal clock, just, we don't pay attention. And to be honest, I'm kind of like that. I mean, I think I'm probably better at it out of practice than I am out of it being something internal in me. Like it's let's face it, the things that we do, they become pretty routine. So, I mean, it's once in a while we'll get something new added in there, but most of what's on my schedule, I've how many times I've called for an appointment for my car? A lot. So I can say that's a 3-minute task, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. But when it's a new thing, trying to track that's going to be a little different. So, I remember like early on actually like tracking my time, like actually like going, okay, I started at this time. How long does it take me to do it? So I think we learn that over time. The other point I want to kind of bounce off that you had said is you mentioned about like a shower, like how long does it take for a shower? The other piece of why that's important is we can also then be intentional when we want that shower to be longer. So it's like I look at it like, I know I can get in and out of the shower 5 minutes. Like it could be a pretty quick thing if I want to.
Yeah.
But there are times I don't, and I want to go, today I have a little extra time this morning. I want to just relax. I want to, use that time. So I think the other value of time management, it's not just about productivity. It's about being intentional in using our time just to relax sometimes and to go, okay, maybe I don't want to do anything on my list right now. Maybe I want to take this time and sit and listen to some music. That's just as important in productivity, in my opinion. Like I value those times where I can go, I'm not going to use that productively. I'm going to take a longer shower. I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to eat my lunch really slowly. When you're when you're using time management well, you have more time to make those choices.
And, even I think you kind of shared a little bit, but that idea of productivity is a part of that. Like it's, we're making that time and space for ourselves. And, if we're even thinking like being productive is doing something with intention behind it, then, scheduling time for us to take the walk or, listening to music and that scheduling downtime, that's productive. Like we're being productive with that. And I think becomes unproductive when it's unintentional and it's, I'm on my phone and I'm just kind of doom scrolling and it's, oh, wow. Hey, where did the night go? Like, I don't know that I would consider that me taking time to relax unless I'm saying, hey, I'm burnt out. Like I just want to take some time and just like zone out on social media. Now that's productive because I'm doing it with a specific intention because I'm not going to stop doing that task and be like, oh, what did I do? Or what was I supposed to be doing? No, that I'm choosing. That's what I'm supposed to be doing in this moment. Yeah. So, because I know there's certain clients I'll talk to and like, they're like, oh, like, I was reading and then, someone came in and they're like, oh, like, you just wasted your weekend away. And they're like, but I really enjoy that. Like that was really meaningful for me. And we talked about how like we can reframe certain pieces of that. And that's one example of many conversations.
Oh, yeah, I think we can reframe a lot of things that way. I mean, even to be honest, even if we, look at the term doom scrolling, there's sometimes I just need that. I just need something mindless. Yeah. And it's, but it's different when you're scrolling by choice versus getting lost in it. Like, I think that's really the key of it, and the other piece, it's interesting when you were talking about the intention stuff, we've had so many episodes where mindfulness comes into play and how many times we've used the term pause on purpose. Pause on purpose is time management. I mean, it really is. It's like, we're really making that part of our kind of routine. So even those things, I do that often. Mine are actually probably more scheduled than other people's. So it's like, for me, I have a morning pause on purpose that happens about the same time every morning. But right after I eat my lunch, I have another just few minutes, put on a song, just kind of relax for a little bit. And I have one at the end of the day. But they are actually scheduled for me. Like it's not, I don't wait to do them until I'm stressed out. It's actually like, I know I need to hit the reset button at this time every day. So yeah, I think it's another good piece that we put as being part of that.
And, as we were talking about this, one thing I do want to make sure we're talking about is it's just an effective technique, and it really just builds itself well into what we're talking about is the Pomodoro technique.
Yeah.
And,
technique.
I again, a lot of this, I think, is we're just taking bits and pieces from different episodes and condensing it down because the Pomodoro technique is not a new concept to the podcast, but ultimately we're kind of thinking about time and intervals, and we're assigning certain tasks during those times and being able to set ourselves up for productive time or intentional time, and then scheduled downtime during that time. And it's even kind of a structured downtime, so to speak. So that way we're not getting lost in the downtime and potentially not returning back. And, so there's so much information out there. And if, any of our listeners aren't familiar with it, I think there's great resources, and even we can post some links in the show notes for it. But one in particular that I know I talk about a lot, I use it personally, to the best of my ability. And it certainly helps to catch myself, especially if there is a time where it's like, maybe I'm 12, 13 minutes into that 25-minute segment and I do get lost. Now it's not lost for an hour. It's just lost for the rest of that 25-minute segment. Right. It's like, oh, okay, now I'm coming back in. Right. Let me now reframe and replan what I'm doing next. So even then it's a nice way of catching ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the value of it is, the Pomodoro technique technically is, this idea of 25 minutes of productivity, 5 minutes of, this reset time. And what's interesting is like, when you ask people, how long does it take you to reset? Most people actually think it takes 20 minutes to a half hour. But research doesn't show that. Research shows actually that 5 minutes is the real best reset time for productivity, time management, and stress management, like those three things connected together. So I think that's the brilliance. It's such a simple technique.
Yeah.
And I think, So I don't necessarily have the timer set according to the Pomodoro technique, but I do have something that reminds me, and it's my Apple Watch. And my Apple Watch every so often will buzz, and I look at it and it goes, "It's time to stand up." And I go, "It is," and I do. It's like it's one of those things where it goes off, and I go, "Yeah, I've been sitting for a while. I've been working on this," and so I'll get up. I'll take a little walk. Usually, kind of do a few things. About 5 minutes, and I kind of turn back to it. So even if you're not technically using an app like Pomodoro or anything like that, honestly, if you have a smartwatch, my guess is it probably tells you more than you think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that, I think it's the 50 minute of the hour. If you haven't had a minute of standing, that's the metric it looks for. And it's, it is certainly a helpful one. And
it's a great one. Yeah.
And I guess wanting to also, as you're talking about that, like just getting those reminders, my thought goes to like being effective as well. And one thing I think is so important is how we're organizing and structuring, I guess, prioritizing certain tasks throughout our day.
Sure.
And, after those anchor points, I oftentimes find myself thinking about like, what can I kind of like double dip on? And so if it's okay, I need to, schedule phone call I need to make phone calls. But also I need to do like laundry or the dishes. And like, I'm going to start with get a load of laundry in the wash. Like, let me load up the dishwasher and get that started, because those are just things that are going to be running in the background. So, I can maybe potentially be doing 3 productive things at one time, because I'm kind of just setting up this domino effect and, making sure I'm setting timers so that way I can come back to do those things. But, when we can let things kind of in the background still be productive, making sure we're capitalizing on that, because so often it's like, I went through my day and I got my chores done, and then it's like, I had to do laundry at night.
Right.
I'm like, you told me that you were sitting down and you were writing. Like, why not pause? Because then you recapture all that time. And so making sure we're thinking about it as what is actually like, my focus time versus I just need to get it set up, and then I press a button and it's off on the races.
Yeah, right. Because there's a lot of those things I think through the day. For me, it really comes down to like the prioritizing. I'm a list person. Like I like having lists. That just helps me, and it kind of coincides with my think by the minutes. I use a modified version of what's called the Eisenhower matrix, which essentially, I have 4 categories of things. I have my do list, my defer list, my delegate list, and my delete list. So those are all kind of listed down. So the Eisenhower matrix, it's essentially you have your important and urgent, you have your important but not urgent, your urgent but not important, and then not important and not urgent. So those are that's part of how I come up with the do, defer, delegate, and delete. So when I make my list, my do list is what do I need to have done today? So what has to be done, within 24 hours is essentially my piece of it. And again, put my minutes on the end of it of how long. My defer needs to get done sometime, but it's just not a priority. I might move those things up at times. I don't necessarily need to. And then the delegate, there's a lot of different things that can kind of fall in there. Like, I oftentimes will say making dinner is sometimes a delegate task. So I love to cook, but there are some days that's just not going to happen. And I delegate to a local pizzeria, and that's who gets to make dinner. But it's what works for that day. The one I probably use a little different than maybe what the technique itself talked about is the delete list. So delete is, maybe we just got to get some stuff off our plate. We're never going to get to them. Mine's a little modified. There's some things when I go through it and I'm like, I don't know why I have this on my list. Sometimes I do get rid of it, but sometimes it's like, I don't want to forget about it. So I'm going to let it hover down here for a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe I get to it. Maybe I don't. But there are certain things that I'm like, one day I want to get to this, but I make sure that I don't have a lot there. So my delete list, if I do have anything that I'm going to hang in there a little bit, it's might delete list is probably a better way to look at it. But I usually don't have more than maybe 5 things that I kind of leave in there. And again, things that I might want to do and still trying to make a decision on it.
Yeah. And, I'm very familiar with the Eisenhower matrix, but it's not something I think I personally use. And actually, either check the show notes, or it might even just be a downloadable link in the show notes. But there's a prioritization matrix that I actually create, and I'll kind of share it with clients that I see. And I love the idea of when if I'm looking at just a variety of tasks, it is oftentimes I find myself just like attaching myself to like, okay, this is what I'm doing first, but I'm not really attending to the entirety of the list. And so this idea of being able to incrementally go down and making comparisons of, okay, this compared to this, to this, to this, to this, and it orients itself really well. So I find myself using a kind of a bit of an abridged version of that quite frequently. And the other piece that I try to implement with this is the idea of efficiency. So depending on the circumstances that are going on, how do I attend to these tasks that I'm identifying are the most important, but I might reorder them slightly to be most efficient? And there's a task that I love doing with clients to talk about efficiency. Of kind of in our local area, I'll give them different errands they have to run, and some of them are social errands, some of them are more we need to stop and get, groceries, but we also we're scheduling to go see a movie, and we're also, we have to pick up a certain thing, and that has to be there at a certain time. And it's what's the most efficient, because we have drive time. We have, one of the things I'm like, hey, you have ice cream. That's part of your grocery. So we need that to be somewhat later on. It doesn't necessarily have to be last, but, I don't want that to be the first thing I'm picking up and I'm going and seeing a movie. I'm going to have ice cream soup afterwards. So we're talking about like different consequences and thinking through. And it's just kind of trying to take all of this and looking at what's the most effective and efficient way of going through these tasks that, I'm eliminating as much waste as possible. So that's maybe wasted time, wasted effort, energy, money, whatever that may whatever that maybe is. And when I try to apply that to myself, I end up being far more efficient. But if I don't take the time to think about it through that way, oftentimes, again, I was talking about that, doing things that can do double duty. And I'm like, why didn't I do this part, like this one earlier on in my day? So I think when we're trying to create that structure of how we're approaching things, that's a really important kind of concept to really keep in mind.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think any of these kind of tools, it just makes us think about our time different, and it's, I think those that are listening, we're throwing out all these things. And I think sometimes when we talk about time management, it almost sounds overwhelming. It's like, how do you have time to time manage? Because it seems so much. I always tell people start with one. Maybe if you heard one thing that we talked about today, pick that, try it, and do it for a while. And so my time management, which you were talking about earlier, tracking time. For me, I kind of go, okay, how long does it take me to do my list and make sure I check my schedule and all that? It actually is only about 5 to 10 minutes of my day. So, I mean, in all of the things that get done, it really is that part. Now, for me, I kind of do it at the end of the day. So usually it's winding down before I go to bed. I don't want things on my mind. So I kind of get that ahead of time. I use my phone now more than I do paper, but it's the way that I do it. But that's not going to be right for everybody. Some people, they're going to do better in the morning putting that together. So what I'd say is do some self-experiments. Pick one thing, try it. As it works, great. Maybe then you implement something else. And it's a layering effect. I've been doing the same thing for probably about 25 years now. And so it works for me. It's my thing. But it sure didn't start that way. So if it sounds overwhelming, don't let it be. Pick one quick thing and work on it.
And to piggyback a little bit off of that, like, and you were talking about your specific process, I think so important is, you are the expert in you. So, being able to recognize what is the thing that I'm most likely to have access to. So, if I love the idea of a handwritten journal or, but I never have a pen, probably not the most effective. Or, hey, I always have my work bag with me and it has, my pen and pencil, but half the time my phone's dead. So that's not going to be reliable. So go with what you know about yourself. And the other piece of that is make it fit for you. And so it might sound silly, but it's like a school whiteboard that's, maybe a 12 inches by 9 inches, and that's what my wife and I use, and it sits on a kitchen counter, especially throughout the weekend, and it's we're both kind of writing notes. We might have different colors, or sometimes if I'm trying to really make something stand out, draw like a little picture or something next to it that's just like, okay, as I'm walking by, something's going to grab my attention, and it's something that's also can be kind of satisfying to just kind of give it a quick wipe when I'm getting something checked off.
Yeah, which was just great. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways. Like, I mean, there's just, and there's no, I think that personalization is super important. And, I know people whiteboards, their whole thing that they do. And they make their list on it. They like to wipe it off. I've tried it. It doesn't, it's not as effective for me, but you got to make it your way. I mean, I've had so many people who, I've talked about what I do and they go, I've tried it and it's just overwhelming. And it's not the right thing. Like it's, really, it should be less than 1% of your day, less than 1% of 1% of your day that you're putting into actually doing it. And when you find what works, go for it. And also pay attention when it doesn't work. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I was talking to somebody the other day who said, I've been trying to do my schedule in the morning, and it's just, I keep doing it. I'm frustrated because I'm not following through with it. Then stop doing it in the morning. Maybe that's, he's like, but it makes sense to do it in the morning. And I said, it does. And I remember trying that and it didn't work for me either. And so then I was like, I'm going to try it at the end of the day. And at my end of my work day, it didn't work for me then either because I kind of wanted to go home and I just needed some downtime. But then when I started doing it at night, it was a click for me. So experiment, try these things. If they don't work, switch them up a little bit. And you can find your own thing.
And, I know we're soon coming up to our time here. And there's just, I guess, one more thing that if we can, I want to add in. And it's the idea of try to simplify the processes down and, invest the time to simplify. And so personally, my wife and I, we meal prep, every Sunday, that's what we're doing. And especially when we're talking about like, okay, what are we going to do? Like we have a kind of a rotating list and sometimes we're trying new things, but a lot of it, we already know what the ingredients are. But I can recall sitting down and it's annoying and it can take some time, but I'll go in and we use a Walmart grocery pickup and I'll create lists of, okay, if we're doing meal prep, let me put all the items that we're going to need in there. So instead of me every week going in and trying to remember what the items are, I go and I hit add all to cart. And then now it saves that time. And I know, okay, it's going to be there for what I need. So again, it takes time to invest in simplifying, but now it just simplifies that process down of like, if we're doing little mini meatloaf things, it's like, all right, click of a button and we know we're going to have everything there. And I know the relative time it's going to take and try to, put it in my day.
Yeah. I think that's a great strategy and a great way to kind of wrap this up because the more we simplify, the better. And realizing that simplifying does take a little investment early on.
It really does.
But it's those minutes will save you so much time down the road. It's, so I think it's a great idea. And it, you got to give yourself a few weeks for it to fall into place. But you're right. It's a great strategy. I don't do that, but I might give that one a shot.
Recommend it. With that, we hope you enjoy this episode. Check back in 2 weeks. But until then, be well, stay psyched. The information contained in this podcast and on the Psyched to Practice website is intended for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing in this podcast or on the website is intended to be a substitute for professional, psychological, psychiatric, educational, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please note that no professional patient relationship is formed here, and similarly, no supervisory or consultative relationship is formed between the host, guests, and listeners of this podcast. If you need the qualified advice of a mental health professional or practitioner, please contact services in your area. Similarly, if you need supervision on clinical matters, please locate a supervisor with experience to fit your professional needs.